Welcome to another video lecture by Utkalp Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to complete this lecture on wave motion and electromagnetic waves. The topics that I will be talking about today include transverse stationary waves, speed of longitudinal waves, vibration in organ pipes, Doppler effect in sound, electromagnetic waves basics, displacement current, energetics of EM waves, and spectra of EM waves. So stationary waves are of two types, transverse stationary wave and longitudinal stationary wave. Here we'll talk about the transverse stationary wave first, and I'll give you the example of a stress string. So there are different harmonics that are involved. We'll talk about all of these. So you have two ends fixed, and you have a string of, let's say, length L between them. So the fundamental harmonic is given by the following condition. There is a pulse in the string such that only half of the wavelength is covered. Okay, so there is no node in the except the corners. Okay, there is no node in the system. So fundamental harmonic has zero nodes. I'm not talking about the ends. Ends are always nodes here. Okay, this you should always remember. At the end, your wave should have a node. So this is your fundamental harmonic. Here your length is equal to lambda by 2 or half of the wavelength. Okay, because the full wavelength is something like this, so you are only considering this half. So that is why L is equal to lambda by 2, and given velocity is equal to lambda into frequency, you have frequency is equal to V by 2L. Similarly, what is the second harmonic? In the second harmonic, again ends are fixed, but now this completes one full wavelength. Okay, or two half wavelengths if you want to consider it like that. So what is really happening is, in the first case there was a pulse going, this was my incident pulse, and this is my reflected pulse from that corner. In the second case, what is happening, this is my incident pulse, it goes like this, it hits the other point which is the rigid end. Okay, it reverses or it inverses its direction, and it comes back like this. Okay, and then this starts again, this loop starts again. So here there is a node in the center, this is the node. Okay, this is your length L. So you can have that your length L is equal to 2 times lambda by 2. Okay, or it is equal to lambda, that is why frequency is equal to V by L. Now let's look at the third harmonic. What is happening here? Again you have the incident wave going like this, it reaches the end, gets reflected by the rigid one, inverses the direction. Okay, and comes back like this, and then this keeps on going, this keeps on going in the system. Okay, so here you see there are two nodes in the system, the net length is L. Now what is the difference between the nodes? So this length is how much? It is L by 3. This is also L by 3, this is also L by 3. You can also write it in terms of lambdas. Here it's 3 lambda by 2 is equal to L, so frequency is equal to 3V by 2L. Similarly, you can have the pth harmonic. What will happen is your incident pulse goes like this. Okay, it hits the end, it reverses its direction, and it comes back like this. Here what do you find? Okay, in the pth harmonic, how many nodes are there in the center? You have p minus 1 nodes. I'm only talking about the nodes that are inside. These two will always be existent. There are p minus 1 nodes. Here I have p into lambda by 2 is equal to L, and frequency is equal to PV by 2L. If you're trying to write, if you're given a wave of, let's say your incident wave is given of some form a sine something something. Okay, then for rigid ends you should remember the previous equation that we read about, so you can easily find what will be the reflected one as well. In the reflected one you will have a minus a sign associated with same wave function. Let's look at the speed of longitudinal waves. So by Newton's formula, I have that the speed of sound waves, this is for sound, so you will remember this. So speed of sound wave in a medium is given by root of E by rho, where rho is the density of the medium and E is the elasticity coefficient of the medium. For solid, this elasticity coefficient becomes Young's modulus. For liquid, it becomes the volume elasticity coefficient of the liquid. And for gas, the Newton's formula requires a correction, which is the Laplace correction. After that, you can write that velocity is equal to root of gamma into P, or P is the pressure, divided by rho. Okay. From here, you can easily see the effect of various quantities. So what is the effect of temperature? First of all, as for a gas, gamma and mw, or mass or the molecular weight, is constant. I'll just write my velocity again. It is equal to gamma p by rho. Using the gas equation, I can write this. First of all, this is gamma pv by mass. Okay, because rho is equal to mass by volume. Or I can write this as using the ideal gas equation, pv is equal to mu RT. Okay, or I can even write this as root of gamma RT by mw. And what is mw? Mw is your molecular weight. So with this in mind, with these equations in mind, I can easily find what is the effect of temperature or effect of humidity on these things. So this is important, and it's a conceptual thing. It can be asked. So you can see that the velocity is directly proportional to root of temperature. Okay, from here you can easily see that. Also, for what about relative humidity? Now with increase in humidity, the density decreases. So because you have this equation with given by gamma p by rho, we conclude that rise in humidity leads to increase in the velocity of sound. Okay, so as the humidity increases, my velocity of sound increases. Okay. Also note that pressure has no effect on this. Although pressure comes in the equation here, you see at the end that pressure has really no influence on it. Okay, so P has no effect. Pressure will have no effect. There will be effect of motion of air. There will be effect of frequency. We'll look at the Doppler's effect for that. Next, we look at the vibration in organ pipes. So here again, two longitudinal waves of the same frequency and same amplitude are traveling in opposite directions, and these will lead to standing waves. Okay, these waves are produced in air columns in a cylindrical tube of uniform diameter. So you have these cylindrical tubes in which these longitudinal waves or sound waves are there, or basically some vibrations are there inside it, and these are air columns. Okay, so air is your medium. Now for the first case is when the tube is closed at one end. So I have shown you like 3 examples in which this end is closed. So all you need to remember from these problems is at the open end you will get an antinode, at a closed end you will get a node. So what does a node mean? It means that there is no freedom to vibrate. At an antinode there is freedom to vibrate. By antinode means maximum amplitude. So in the first case, let's say you are blowing air at the open end. Okay, now the column will vibrate, forming antinodes at the free ends and nodes at the ends that are fixed, or the ends that are closed. So if the length of the entire column is L, then I can have various cases. The first is the fundamental case. So what happens in the fundamental case? If you look closely, this is your incident wave. It forms a node here and it gets reflected back and it forms a antinode. Okay, so in this case what do you have? This length L is equal to how much? This entire thing, this length is equal to lambda by 4. Okay, why? Because you can easily see that this is my entire wavelength. Okay, this is lambda by 2, and what we have is this case. If this is my reflected one, so I only have this much available. Okay, so this is my fundamental case. So just using these two principles, you can easily make these. So I don't really need to write everything down, but for the sake of completeness, my velocity or my speed of sound is given by v, my frequency is given by f. Okay, or I can easily also give it by mu in the question, doesn't matter. So for the fundamental case, what do I have? I have that L is equal to lambda by 4, so lambda is equal to 4L, or if I just use this in this formula, I can write that my frequency, which here I am denoting by n. Okay, because we were supposed to count it as integers. So n is equal to n1 is equal to v by lambda is equal to v by 4L. This is your fundamental frequency. Next, what you'll have the first overtone. Okay, in the first overtone, what happens is, if you look closely here again, so you send in your wave, it forms a node here, goes, and it should form a node at the end. Okay, an antinode at the open end. That is all you know. For the first overtone, note that for the first overtone you will have one node in the center. Similarly, for the second overtone, you will have two nodes in the center. So this must be noted. And if you can easily make this in the paper, you can find what is the distance between each node. Okay, so in this case, for example, in the second overtone, you can easily see that this is equal to half of lambda by 2 in this case. Okay, here also you can see the distance between two nodes is lambda by 2. So these can be easily made in the paper. That is why you are not supposed to remember these things. So what do you have? You have L is equal to 3 lambda by 4 for the second overtone, or the first overtone. For the second, you have 5 lambda by 4. This gives me at the end the value of frequency as 3 v by 4L and 5 b by 4L. So take a note of uh, the way that they can be represented in the questions. The fundamental frequency will always be for the first case. The second case can be either called first overtone or third harmonic, because there is a factor 3 here. And the next case can be known as second overtone or fifth harmonic. Note that whenever this term overtone comes, second overtone will have two nodes. So make your diagram appropriately. The first overtone will have one node, and the fundamental will have no nodes in the center. Okay. So for this case, you can write that for the mth overtone, your length is equal to 2m plus 1 lambda by 4. Using this, you can easily find what is your frequency. So frequency is 2m plus 1 v by 4L. So you will in the questions, you will be given with the velocity of sound, or you already know the velocity of sound in here, and you will probably be given with the length, and you will be either trying to find n or you will be trying to find m. Okay, this is your case when they are closed at one end. What happens if they are not closed, both the sides are open? Same logic applies. At the open end you'll have an antinode, at the closed end you'll have a node. So here uh, for the fundamental case, itself, you have one node in the system. Okay, so when I'm trying to make anything, my minimum thing that I can make is this, to have two antinodes. Okay, the next thing that I can make is something like this. Okay, so that there are again nodes at the end. Similarly here I can have nodes at the end. Here also look, what is happening here is the same thing. You send in a wave. Let's say this is your tube. Okay, this is your wave. Okay, it reaches here, it gets reflected back and comes like this. Okay, this is what is happening in the picture. Now if here also you have length is equal to lambda by 2 for the first case. Okay, this is known as a fundamental frequency. For the second case, you have your first overtone given by 2v by 2L. Third case, you have the second overtone, which is 3v by 2L. So for the mth overtone, you have L is equal to m plus 1 into lambda by 4, or n is equal to m plus 1 v by 2L. You are not supposed to, I don't suggest you to remember these formulas. All you need to remember are the two conditions. that you need to have an antinode at the open end and a node at the closed end, and start making from the basic level what is the minimum thing that you can do, and then keep adding nodes to the system. Now, a closed organ pipe has a fundamental frequency of 1.5 kHz. The number of overtones that can be distinctly heard by a person with this organ pipe will be, assuming that the highest frequency a person can hear is 20,000 Hz. So for a closed pipe vibration, first of all you should note that this end should have the node, okay, of the wave. So we have a simple formula which is for the nth node mode, the frequency of vibration, let's say mu, is nothing but 2 times n minus 1 by 4l into v, okay, where v is the velocity and l is the length. So for the nth mode we have 2n minus 1 into the fundamental frequency, where fundamental frequency is v by 4l. Okay, fundamental frequency is already given to you, and the highest value of the frequency is also given to you. So let's just equate the highest value of frequency that is given, that can be heard. So 20,000 can have 2n minus 1 into the fundamental frequency, which is equal to 1500. So this gives me that n is similar to 7.1 or 7. N is equal to 7.1, which is similar to 7. Therefore, the number of overtones is equal to number of overtones is equal to number of mode of vibration minus 1. Number of mode of vibration minus 1. So from here you can see that this is equal to 7 minus 1 is equal to 6. So 6 is your answer. 6 is the number of overtones that are allowed. Next, let's talk about the Doppler effect for sound waves, which is also known as the acoustic Doppler effect. So the apparent change in the frequency of sound when the source of sound, the observer, and the medium are in relative motion is known as Doppler effect. Okay, so the equations that I have given you here, okay, these were derived based on the assumption that the velocity of the source, the observer, and the medium are along the line joining the positions of the source and observer. Note that if they're not, then you need to take the components that are along the lines joining these, and then those will decide the frequency. For example, if this is my observer, this is my source, then I am assuming in these definitions, I am assuming that these are along the line joining these two. Okay, if this is not the case, if observer is here, a sound source is here, okay, but source is emitting a sound in this direction, so that will have a component Vy, that will also have a component Vx. Okay, so whatever component is along this line will be involved in calculating the apparent frequency. So before looking at the formula, I'll just give you the important points so that you are able to remember this formula properly. So when your source of sound, this is the case, you are the observer here, you are trying to listen, and your source is emitting some waves towards you. Okay, now this can be in practicality, you can observe this when a train is coming close to you. Okay, you are sitting here, a train is coming close to you, or a train is going away from you, or a train is standing, it's blowing a horn, and you are running away from it, or you are coming towards it. Okay, these are the 4 cases which I'll explain here. So if the source, which is your train, is approaching you, you are at rest right now, and the train is approaching you, in that case the frequency that you hear, the frequency of sound that you hear, is higher than the normal frequency. So mu prime is greater than mu. Okay, or n prime, if in some literatures you find it to be n prime. N prime is greater than n. Also, if the observer is approaching the source, if the source is standing and blowing the horn, and my observer is coming in this direction, then also you see that the apparent frequency is increasing. So from here you can easily see that As the relative distance between these two is decreasing, in that case your frequency is increasing. What is the next case? Now I will increase the relative distance between them, or the distance between them. So my source is moving away from the observer, or my observer is moving away from the source. In both the cases, my apparent frequency is less than my actual frequency. So whatever I am going to experience is having a less frequency than the actual frequency that is there. So if the distance between these two is increasing with time, okay, between the source and the observer, in that case my frequency will be less than the actual frequency. Another case is of the effect of medium. So what will the medium do? If the medium itself has a velocity, for example a wind is blowing, so that will affect the velocity of sound that we have taken as v. So in the question you will be given the velocity of sound, and if a wind is blowing or the medium already has a velocity of its own, okay, then if the medium has a velocity vm and it is in the direction of the sound, then your v, actually your velocity becomes v plus vm. So instead of v you will be writing v plus vm. However, if it's in the opposite direction to the velocity of sound, you will write v minus vm. Okay, with this in mind we look at the formula. So your apparent frequency, or the frequency that the observer hears, is equal to your actual frequency into the into in the numerator you have velocity of sound plus minus vm, velocity of medium. So if the velocity of medium is in the direction of velocity of sound, you will have v plus vm, and otherwise v minus vm. So note the first two things are common for both. Now next is my velocity of observer and velocity of source. So as you can see, you don't need to remember what the plus and minuses are right now. If your logic is clear, then my velocity of sound will be replaced by velocity plus or minus velocity of medium. And what about observer and source? Okay, so note that source is coming in the numerator, observer is coming in the numerator, source is coming in the denominator. And how to fix the sign of these two? So as you can see from the observations that I made before, uh, if my observer is approaching the source, okay, in that case my apparent frequency is increasing. So if this has to increase and this an observer VO is in the numerator, okay, then that means this will be a plus sign. Okay, so when my observer is approaching the source with some velocity VO, in that case I will take a plus sign. When my observer is going away from the source, as the n prime is decreasing, so that implies I will take the negative sign. For the source I will do the reverse. So because it's in the denominator, so I know that if I take the plus sign and I add a vs in the denominator, that will lead to what? That will lead to a reduction in the n prime, or reduction in the apparent value. Now when does the reduction in the apparent value happens? It happens when source is moving away from the observer. Okay, so when the source is moving away, you will be using the plus sign. When the source is moving towards, you will be using a minus sign. So let's try attempting a very interesting question. A person standing on an open ground hears the sound of a jet aeroplane coming from north at an angle 60 degree with the ground level. But he finds the airplane right vertically above his position. If v is the speed of sound, what is the speed of plane? What this is really saying is, I have my observer right over here, the person on the ground. Okay, when he sees that the plane has reached this point, let's say this point is P. Okay, when the plane has reached this point, at that particular moment, he observes that there is a sound coming in from a point, let's say Q, okay, which is at an angle of 60 degree, because this angle was 60, so the top angle is also 60. Now what is really happening is, because light is traveling at what speed? Light is traveling at very high speeds, 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. And how is the sound traveling? Sound is somewhere close to 340 meter per second. So what happens is, sound will take a finite amount of time to reach your point O. So when the plane was at the point Q, it emitted the sound wave. Okay, so it emitted a sound wave in your direction. Now this sound wave traveled this much distance, OQ, or let me just call this as R so that PQR is easier to see. So this much distance it traveled with the velocity of v in, let's say, a time t. Also note that in the same time t, it moved from the point Q to the point P, because as soon as it reached the point P, the observer heard the sound wave. So the times for both the motions are same. So let me first talk about the distance PQ. So PQ is what? It is v of velocity of my plane, okay, into, let's say, the time taken t to in going from the point Q to the point P. Okay. Next, I have my distance QR, which is equal to what? It is the velocity of the sound wave into the same time t. So in the same time my plane reached from Q to P, and in the same time my sound wave that the plane emitted reached from Q to R. Okay. Now because cos of 60 from this triangle, you can easily see it is equal to PQ by QR. You are able to see that half of Vp into t divided by V, velocity of sound, into the same time t. Okay, sorry, this is equal to half because cos 60 is half. From here you can easily see that velocity of p is nothing but v by 2. The next question, a train is moving towards a stationary observer with a speed of 34 meters per second. So this is your observer, this is your train. The source is moving towards the observer. The train sounds a whistle and its frequency registered by the observer is f1. So f1 is the frequency or the apparent frequency observed by the observer. If the speed of the train is reduced to 17 meters per second, then the frequency registered is f2. Okay, so f2 is the frequency registered the next time. If speed of sound is 340 meters per second, then the ratio f1 by f2 is given by what? So this is a question from Doppler's effect. So according to Doppler's effect of sound, when source is moving but observer is at rest, I can write that my frequency apparent is nothing but my actual frequency into velocity of sound minus velocity of sound divided by velocity of sound minus velocity of source. Okay, so my f1 is equal to f0 into the velocity of sound is 340 meters per second. Sometimes in the paper velocity of sound will not be given to you, so you should know this value. It is 340 meters per second, and this is your first one. Similarly, I can write it for the second case as well. Here f0 is like this. You have 340 divided by 340 minus 17. Therefore, if I just divide these two, what do I find? I find 340 minus 17 divided by 340 minus 34, or that implies my f1 by f2 nothing but 19 by 18. So this is your answer. So let's look at this question. A musician using an open flute of length 50 cm produces second harmonic sound waves. So first of all, let's see what an open flute is. This is your fundamental frequency because it's open at both ends. Your next one is, let me just make the diagram properly. Note that in the open case, it needs to be the wave needs to have antinodes at both the ends. So this is your case for the second harmonic. This is your second harmonic sound. Here what do you see? This is the total length. How many wavelengths are there? There is lambda by 2 plus lambda by 4 plus lambda by 4. So total length is equal to lambda. If total length is equal to lambda, I can easily find my frequency. My frequency is equal to velocity by lambda is equal to velocity by L. Now what is this? This is the frequency of the sound produced by the open flute. So let me call this f0. So this f0 is nothing but 2 into 330, which is the sound, that is the wave speed is given as 330, divided by your length. Length is given to be 50 centimeter, so it's 0.5 meter, which gives me the sound that this flute is producing is this much. Now it's given that a person is running towards the musician from another end of the hall at the speed of 10 km per hour. So let's see that, guys. This is your observer with sitting with the flute. Okay, you have this is your source sitting with the flute. You have an observer who is running towards this source at 10 km per hour, and we need to find what? We need to find the frequency heard by the running person. So in this case, again, we will apply the Doppler's effect in sound. So the frequency detected is equal to the frequency that was originally there into velocity plus velocity of observer, because observer is coming towards the source, divided by velocity of the wave or the velocity of the sound. This gives me that f prime is nothing but f naught, which was 660, into 330 plus 25 by 9 divided by 330. Okay, why 25 by 9? Because I converted 10 km per hour to meter per second. So just solving this, I get my f prime to be equal to 665.55, which is similar to 666 hertz. So in this question, we will talk about the beat frequency. Now, two sources of sound, S1 and S2, produce sound waves of the same frequency, 660 hertz. Okay, so I have a source S1, I have a source S2, both are producing sound waves of 660 hertz. A listener or the observer is moving from source S1 towards S2 with a constant speed of u meter per second. So let this be my listener, and it is moving towards S2 with u meter per second. He hears 10 beats per second. Okay, so the velocity of sound is 330. Then what is the velocity of the listener? First of all, let me use the Doppler effect to see what is the frequency coming from source 1. So the listener is moving away from source 1. So the frequency, the apparent frequency that he hears due to the frequency from sound from S1 is nothing but F1 is equal to F into V minus velocity of observer divided by velocity of sound. And for F2, it is moving towards the source. So we have F V plus V naught by V. Okay. Now the next input that you're given in the question is the beat frequency. Note that beat frequency is nothing but the difference in these frequencies. Okay, the beat frequency is the difference between these. F2 minus F1 is equal to F into 2 V naught by V. V naught is the velocity of the observer, V0. Or the beat has been given to be 10. So there are 10 beats. Whatever the value of F2 minus F1 is, those are the number of beats that are there. It is equal to 660 hertz into 2 times u by 330, which gives me the value of u to be 2.5 meter per second. I use this last question to give you one more small concept that has been important for both JEE and for all the other competitive examinations that are there, the private ones, the NEET, medical, CETs. In every case, the question about decibels is quite prominent. So let's look at this question and make a note of the formula. A small speaker delivers 2 watt of audio output. At what distance from the speaker will one detect 120 decibel intensity of sound? Here given reference intensity of sound is 10 to the power minus 12 watt per meter square. Now you have the formula beta is equal to 10 log base 10 into I by I naught, where I is your reference intensity of sound or reference intensity, I is your intensity, and beta is what you are interested in. It will be given in decibels. Okay, intensity. So I have 120 is equal to 10 log base 10 into I by 10 to the power minus 12. Please take a note of this. This is quite important. Okay, this might not come those many times in JEE mains. It has come in the past, but it might not come every time. But if you are preparing for any other examination as well, this will be crucial, because every time there is one question, whether it's BITS, VIT, CETs, NEET, AIMS, every time this question will come. So 120 is equal to 10 log base 10 I by 10 to the power minus 12. So I is nothing but your power by a point source, 4 pi r square, is nothing but 2 by 4 pi r square. Okay, so on solving 1 and 2, you will see that my r is nothing but 40 centimeter. We now begin our discussion about electromagnetic waves. So a changing electrical field produces a changing magnetic field and vice versa, and these give rise to a transverse wave known as the electromagnetic wave. You should note that the time varying electrical field and the magnetic field are mutually perpendicular to each other, and they are also perpendicular to the direction of propagation of the wave. I have shown you the diagram here. Here the wave is propagating in the x direction. It is the direction with the velocity given by c. So the wave has a velocity equal to c in vacuum, and you have your electrical field component oscillating like this, okay, in the plane that is shown to you. So it's oscillating in the y-x plane, and similarly your magnetic field is oscillating in the z into x plane. So note that the direction of propagation will be common to both the planes. So it will be either xz or it will either be xy for the different oscillations. And you should also note these electromagnetic waves will consist of sinusoidally time varying electrical and magnetic fields. So the form of your wave, the wave that is supposed to be of this form, ax plus minus vt. Okay, in this form, these will be sine waves that will come into the picture when you talk about electromagnetic waves. Now let's talk about the concept of displacement current. Now when a capacitor is allowed to charge in an electrical circuit, now let's discuss about the concept of displacement current. So I have a capacitor in front of you. When this capacitor is allowed to charge in an electrical circuit, so this is maybe an electrical circuit of some sort. So when this is allowed to charge, there is a current flowing in the circuit, okay, and this leads to charging of the different plates of the capacitor. Now as charge starts to accumulate on the two plates, okay, there is a change in the electrical field between them. So initially there was no field between them when the current was off. Now when you started to charge and gave this, let's say, a positive charge q, this plate a negative charge minus q, then you say that during this process what you found that the electrical field between these two plates was changing. Now Maxwell suggested that a changing electrical field is equivalent to a current through a capacitor. Okay, that current will be known as your displacement current. So a changing electrical field leads to a current through the capacitor, okay, and this capacitor is known as your displacement current. To see how this really works, let's quickly see what your electrical field inside a parallel plate capacitor is. It's equal to sigma by epsilon naught is equal to q by epsilon naught a. In order to derive what this current looks like, you know that the current is equal to dq by dt. So let's say if the charge on these plates, okay, it's increasing by a factor of dq in time dt, then the current, or first of all dq can be written as sum I into dt, okay, the current into dt. Now the change in electrical field is given by d is equal to dq by epsilon naught a is equal to I dt by epsilon naught using this form. So I can be written as epsilon naught a into dE by dt is equal to epsilon naught d by dt of E into A, because area of the capacitor plate is not changing. Okay, which can be written as epsilon naught dA dE by dt. Now A is nothing but the electrical flux. So you have your current through the capacitor, I'll call this ID, is equal to epsilon naught into d of phi E by dt, where phi is the electrical flux. Okay, now IC, which I've already shown you in this diagram, IC is my conduction current. Okay, it is the current due to the flow of charges in the conductor. Now the new current that we observed is ID. ID is the displacement current, and it is the current due to changing electrical fields between the plate of the capacitor. And you should know that the total current I is the sum of IC and ID. Okay, using this, our Ampere's circuital law is slightly modified. So instead of having just my IC into the picture, which gives me integral of B dot dl is equal to mu naught into IC, I have B dot dl is equal to mu naught into IC plus mu naught into epsilon naught into d phi E by dt. Okay, this will be essential if you want to calculate anything for a case of a capacitor or a circuit which has a capacitor. And similarly, your Maxwell's equations are also changed for this. So your Maxwell's Ampere circuit law becomes integral of B dot dl is equal to mu naught IC plus epsilon naught d phi E by dt. With this in hand, let's look at some properties of electromagnetic waves. So I'll just talk about the extremely important properties that are essential for the examination point of view. First of all, the electrical and the magnetic fields satisfy the following wave equations. I've zoomed these in so that you can make a note of these. Okay, so this is your first equation. This is your second equation. Okay, these can be obtained from the Maxwell's third and fourth equations, but you should definitely remember them. Okay, these are similar to your wave equations that I described for you. Okay, so you have the electrical field given as E, you have the magnetic field given as B, and you have your C, or the velocity of this wave, is equal to 1 by root of mu naught into epsilon naught. Okay, if you just compare this to the general wave equation that we talked about, you will note that this is the velocity of the wave that I talked about. Here we are calling that velocity to be c, because electromagnetic waves are traveling at the speed of light. Okay, this is a essential quantity. You know already that this has a value of 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. Okay. Secondly, you should note that the electrical and magnetic fields of the electromagnetic wave are perpendicular to each other and also perpendicular to the direction of wave propagation. Therefore, they are transverse waves. Sometimes factual questions are asked based on these. The next thing that you should definitely remember is the instantaneous magnitude of E and B of electrical field vector and the magnetic field vector. The instantaneous magnitudes of these in an electromagnetic wave are related by the expression E by B is equal to C. Okay, this will be very handy. Note that these are the instantaneous magnitudes. Okay, not the entire vector itself. These are instantaneous magnitudes. Okay, next we'll talk about the Poynting vector. What is the Poynting vector? So first of all, electromagnetic waves carry energy with them. So the rate of flow of energy crossing a unit area is described by the Poynting vector. It is given by S is equal to 1 by mu naught of E cross B. Okay, you should remember this form as well. Okay. It is the rate of flow of energy crossing a unit area. Okay, this will be essential. Now you can define some other quantities as well. So electromagnetic waves will carry some momentum and hence they will exert some pressure as well on surfaces. I will call this the radiation pressure. Radiation pressure. and it is given by a pointing vector, or the magnitude of the pointing vector, divided by velocity c. This is the case for when your electromagnetic wave is falling on a perfectly absorbing surface. So this is for the perfectly absorbing surface, and for the perfectly reflecting surface I will have this. Okay, for perfectly reflecting surface, so you should make a small note of these things. The next important thing that I want to talk to you about is how these will come in the paper. They will come in the form of waves like this. Okay, you will have electrical field vector, magnetic field vector, you will have a magnitude. Okay, and you will have sine or cosine functions of these. So what you should remember from these forms is, first of all, kx minus omega t means these are traveling in the positive x direction. Okay, whether you write omega t minus kx or you write kx minus omega t doesn't really make much of a difference, because only the negative sign will come outside, because it's a sine function. Okay, so omega is your angular frequency and k is your wave number. These were already defined before. Okay, uh, one thing that you should remember from here is, whenever you will be given the electrical or the magnetic field vectors, you will be given whatever is written here, let's say this. Okay, then there will be a direction as well associated with it. Okay, so whatever is inside, this is the direction of propagation of wave. Okay, and this unit vector outside is the direction of your oscillations of electrical field. Similarly, for the magnetic field also, you will get some direction, either k or minus j or something. So these, the vectors that are outside, they will denote the oscillations or the vibrations of electrical and magnetic fields separately, and the thing that is inside, kx minus, it is x, so it's propagating along the x direction. You might get in the paper this to be y or this to be z as well. So you should take a note of these and remember that my electrical field is always perpendicular to magnetic field, and it is perpendicular to my direction of propagation. Is often trouble students. Some other things that I want to talk to you about is the first of all, that the intensity of the sinusoidal plane electromagnetic wave is defined as the average value of the pointing vector taken over one cycle. So my intensity, if someone asks you about the intensity, it's nothing but the average value of the pointing vector is equal to maximum value of E, maximum value of B divided by 2 mu naught. Okay, and this then can be written as em square by 2 mu naught c, or c by 2 mu naught bm square, using just the definition of the pointing vector. So these come in very handy when you look at the questions. You should also remember that these are normal waves, so they will also follow the superposition principle. Okay, and when it comes to the optical effects, you should always look out for the electrical vector of the electromagnetic field. Okay. So electrical field will sometimes always be also be called as the electrical vector or the light vector. Okay, so this vector is important because this will often come in the chapter on wave optics. Okay, next I can look at the whole spectrum. I've provided the same spectrum in front of you. You can find this in a book as well, but I would suggest you to pause the video and take small notes of it. Okay, and what do you have here? You have your gamma, or sorry, your lambdas given right over here. You have your frequencies given here. You should take a note of where microwaves lie, where radio waves lie, where is infrared, what is the visible light spectrum. Okay, ultraviolet, then x-rays, then gamma rays. Which is higher in energy? Whichever is higher in frequency will be higher in energy. So gamma rays is higher than x-rays, then ultraviolet, then visible, infrared, microwaves, and radio waves. Okay, This is given here. You can pause the video and look at this diagram. And these are all the essential things that you need to remember from here. Can be many factual questions asked from this topic as well. So it will be better if you expand your knowledge a little for those questions. But if you are short on time, then these are the only things that you should remember while going for the paper. So let's look at the question. Arrange the following electromagnetic radiations per quantum in the order of increasing energy. So what is the energy of an electromagnetic wave? It is given by E is equal to h into c divided by lambda, where h is the Planck's constant, c is the speed of light. Okay, from here you can see that your energy is inversely proportional to your lambdas, or we can write that energy is directly proportional to your frequency mu. Now here, as you had seen in the spectrum before, my X-rays come, then the Vibgyor comes, or the visible spectrum, and then the radio waves come here. This is the direction in which the frequency is increasing, and this is the direction in which the wavelengths are increasing. So X-rays have the least wavelength, radio waves have the most wavelength in out of these four. So using this I can easily see that I have to compare blue light, yellow light, X-ray and radio wave. So blue is here, yellow is here, X-ray is somewhere over here, and radio waves is somewhere over here. So my order of energy is what? My order of energy is C, or X-ray. X-ray was C, is greater than my blue light. Blue light was what? Blue light was A. It is greater than yellow. Yellow was given by B. And finally you have your radio waves as D. So next you're given another question. A red LED emits light at 0.1 watt uniformly around it. The amplitude of the electrical field of the light at a distance of 1 meter from the diode is given by what? So first of all, what is my average intensity? It is nothing but half into epsilon naught into E square C. We just saw this formula. Now this can be written as P by 4 pi r square, because this is a point source. Okay, because this LED is similar to a point source. That is why I can write that my E is nothing but the root of 2 times P divided by epsilon naught into 4 pi into r square into C. On putting the values that are given to us, you are given the value of power P, the amplitude. Okay, so the distance is also given to you as 1 meter. Radius is given to you as 1 meter, and if I put these values into the equation, I get the answer as 2.45 per meter. Let's solve a question. A plain electromagnetic wave of frequency 50 megahertz travels in free space along the positive x direction. At a particular point in space and time, my electrical field vector is given by 6.3 into j cap. The corresponding magnetic field B at that point will be how much? So first of all, we know that we can find the amplitudes, and between them given by the relation by mod of E divided by mod of B is equal to C. Okay, this was given to you. So from here I can first of all calculate what is my mod of the magnetic field. It is nothing but mod of the electrical field divided by C. C is the speed of light. If I just substitute the values here, what do I get? I get 6.3 divided by 3 into 10 to the power 8, which gives me 2.1 into 10 to the power minus 8. Now the next thing that you should remember is, and write this at another ink. So we have that E crossed with B is in the direction of your velocity. It's in the direction of the propagation. Okay. Now because it is given that the EM wave is traveling around along the positive x direction, so I can write that my E cross B is equal to I cap. Therefore, what will be my B? If my electric field is along the J cap direction, and if the propagation is along the I cap direction, B is perpendicular to both. And if I just take the dot product, I can easily see that my magnetic field vector is along the direction of K cap. Okay, this is not equal, this is in the direction of K cap. So I can write this as my B cap, or the unit vector along B, is equal to unit vector along K. So we got the direction from here and you got the magnitude from here. So using these two equations, you can say that your answer is 2.1 into 10 to the power minus 8 into K cap. This was easier question because only 2.1 was given as the answer, but sometimes they'll give you same 2.1 with maybe I cap here, or maybe K cap here, or J cap here, or minus I cap here. So you should note what the actual directions are. In the next question, you are given an electromagnetic wave of intensity 50, which is entering in a medium of refractive index n without any loss. The ratio of the magnitudes of electrical fields and the ratio of magnitudes of magnetic field of the wave before and after entering into the medium are respectively given by what? So first of all, you should note what is the speed of electromagnetic wave in free space. That speed is nothing but 1 by root of mu naught into epsilon naught. In medium, what is the speed? In any medium, the speed becomes 1 by root of k times epsilon naught into mu naught. Okay, so if I divide these two equations, I get that C by V, nothing is equal to root of k, is your refractive index n, because refractive index is defined by C divided by velocity in the medium. Okay, now with this in hand, I can write the intensity. What is the intensity for the electromagnetic wave? My intensity is half epsilon naught into E naught square into the velocity c, and this can be written as half into epsilon naught into k times E square into V. Okay, because there is no energy loss when going from air to that medium. Thus I can write that E naught square into C is equal to k times E square into velocity. This is the velocity in the medium. Now you have a relation connecting the electrical fields in both the cases. Using this, I can easily write. I can write that E naught square divided by E square is equal to k times V by C, where C is your velocity, C 3 into 10 to the power 8. Okay, this is your Vm. This can be written as what? This is nothing but n square divided by n. That implies I can write this simply as E naught by E is equal to root of n. Similarly, I can do the same thing in terms of magnetic fields also. Instead of this relation, I'll be using the relation B naught square C by 2 mu naught. So from there, I can get a similar relation for magnetic field. So B naught square C divided by 2 mu naught is equal to B square V by 2 mu naught. Okay, this will give me that B naught by mu naught is equal to 1 by root over n. That is why the answer for this is your option number 3. Let's solve this question. A 27 milliwatt laser beam has a cross-sectional area of 10 millimeter square. The magnitude of the maximum electrical field in this electromagnetic wave is given by what? So first of all, you should know what is the intensity of a EM wave. So my intensity is nothing but power per unit area. Okay, this is nothing but half epsilon naught into E naught square into the velocity, which is c. Here E naught is the maximum electrical field. Now I can just evaluate this. This is nothing but I already have the value of my intensity because power has been already given to me. So I can write this as, or I'll write this below this. I'll write it here. So my power is given as 27 into 10 to the power minus 3. My area is 10 into 10 to the power minus 6. This is nothing but half into 9 into 10 to the power minus 12 into E naught square into 3 into 10 to the power 8. From here, from simple calculations, you can find that your E naught is nothing but root 2 times 10 to the power 3 kilovolt per meter equal to 1.4 kilovolt per meter. So 50 watt per meter square energy density of sunlight is normally incident on the surface of a solar panel. Some part of the incident energy is reflected from the surface and the rest is absorbed. The force exerted on the 1 meter square surface area will be close to what? So here I'll introduce another formula that will be useful for you. So my force exerted is equal to 1 plus R. R is the reflection coefficient into I into A divided by your velocity C. So I want you to take a note of this. Okay. With this in mind, I can easily calculate the force, which is nothing but 1 plus 0.25 into 50 into 1 divided by 3 into 10 to the power 8, which is nothing but 20 into 10 to the power minus 8 Newton. Let's solve another question. The electrical field of a plane polarized electromagnetic wave in free space at time t is equal to 0 is given by the expression that is given to you here. Okay. The magnetic field B is given by which of these? So in order to do this, let me just first of all write what is given to me. So I have my electric and start writing from here. So I have my electrical field is given as 10 into j cap into cos of kx plus 8z. So this can be written as cos of 6 I cap plus 8 k cap dot product with x I cap plus z times k cap. Okay, so I can condense it down to the simple terms, which is 10 j cap into cos of some vector k, which is this much, dotted with your vector r. So this is your first equation. Here k is equal to 6 I cap plus 8 k cap. Okay, so k is equal to 6 I cap plus 8 k cap, which I have shown you here. And what is the direction of the wave? This is your k cap gives you the direction of the wave. So this is the dot product form of waves. Uh, this was not mentioned in the notes before. That is why I want you to take a note of it. If your wave is given as a function of k dot r, okay, then this k defines the direction of propagation of the wave, where r is your position vector. With this in mind, I'll mark this thing as important. This will be used in several of the other questions as well, so you should take a note of it. Now uh, I can easily see what this really is, so I'll just make it on the right side. Okay, so what do we have here? We have the electrical field in the j cap direction. We have this has a direction of propagation, or c cap. C cap is the direction of the propagation. It is 6i plus 8k. Okay. And how much is this? This will be your direction of the magnetic field, because all the three have to be perpendicular to each other. So first of all, what do I have? In order to find c cap, what do? I already have the direction k. I need to find k cap. So for doing it, what do? I take the mod of k and then write k divided by mod of k is equal to k cap. If I do this, so this direction c cap is equal to k cap is nothing but 3i plus 4k divided by 5. This is your direction of propagation of light. Now next thing that I want to use is the simple procedure, that is c cross e. C cap cross e cap is equal to how much? It is minus 4i cap plus 3 times k cap divided by 5. Now we already know that the magnitude of B is equal to E by C is equal to 10 by C. So at least we know the magnitude, and we know that the direction of B field will be in the direction of C cross E. So using this, I can write that B, my magnetic field B is equal to its magnitude 10 by C into the direction. So what is the direction? 4i cap plus 3k cap by 5, which is nothing but minus 8i cap plus 6k cap divided by C. If I write this in terms of xyz, so my final answer will be how much? I can write this as my magnetic field is equal to 6k cap minus 8i cap divided by C. This is your direction, into what do you have? You have the cos function, which will again be 6x plus 8z minus 10 times ct. Okay, this is your final form, and this conforms with the second option that is given to you here.